Thank you very much for that great introduction, Evan. Again, we're really excited to have you. And the first thing I'm going to ask, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how did you end up here in Philadelphia, and anything else you want to share so that we get an idea of where you're coming from?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and went to high school in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. And my parents, right now, they live in Nebraska, in Omaha. So I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to the University of Missouri way back in the day, graduated 2015 through their Arts and Sciences. I was a linguistics major. And I worked for quite a while in Shanghai, China as an English teacher. And now I'm here getting my master's degree at UPenn, continuing to learn about teaching English to speakers of other languages, which is TESOL.
That's awesome. Well, again, we're really glad you're in the area. Swarthmore is only maybe 10 miles or so away from Penn, and we're just so excited to be able to make these connections with people living in and around the Philadelphia area and being involved with the different colleges and universities around here. We just want to bridge these gaps and make some collaborations here at the radio station. So thank you, Evan. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Oh, absolutely. So I was an English teacher for children and adults in Shanghai, China. But I also worked as a video game designer and a user interface designer. So I've got kind of a tech background and also some educational experience. Right now, I work for the University of Pennsylvania as a graduate assistant, and I am working for Dr. Irina Kozlova. We're working on making some virtual classrooms and digital spaces that might be useful in language learning.
That's really cool. Me personally, I love language. I am not very good at language. I feel like I can barely speak English sometimes, but I would love to learn a second language at some point. And hearing that you're not only a speaker of multiple languages, but educating other people, that just gets me really excited. So that's so cool. So how did you decide to pursue graduate studies, and what has your experience been like so far?
Yeah, so I can kind of trace it back to essentially a bombed interview. I sat down at Oxford Publishing in Shanghai, their Shanghai office, and I had an interview that did not go so well. And it wasn't because of my ideas they sat me down and had me look at some curriculum. And I gave them a few ideas, and it wasn't the ideas that were the problem. It was the language that they were communicating in, right? The language of pedagogy, speaking in academic terms that I just wasn't using. And I just felt like I needed a way to kind of formalize some of my ideas in a way that I could share them professionally with other academics, and also apply them to curriculum development and design. And so I felt like I needed to kind of level up, and it was the right time to go and get formal training with education. Previously, I had no kind of formal teaching training, and I felt like I would really benefit from that. And it's been great. I've learned so much at the Graduate School of Education at Penn, and it's really helped to solidify and to kind of make me think about some of the practices that I bring to the classroom.
That's really cool. I mean, listening to you, what I could take from that is you both wanted to level up your own skills, but also innovate in this space to kind of level up the community and also be able to better collaborate, communicate with the people in this space.
Yeah, I saw. So at the place I was working, it was a training center in Shanghai, and they've got some pretty serious restrictions about what curriculum you're supposed to be teaching, when you're supposed to be doing the lessons, how much time should you spend on each activity. And at the first, I was being watched very closely to make sure I was implementing everything how they wanted me to. But of course, after you do a good job, then they start to give you a little freedom. But I really wanted to make the best of that. So coming to kind of learn some of the skills and learn some of the practices that are widely used across the educational industry has been really great and helped me to kind of explore the possibilities in the classroom.
that's interesting hearing you mention about it being kind of rigid and having this very defined structure. As an educator myself, teaching in the computer science department, I always feel like there's this sort of tug of war between rigid and flexible curriculum, and it's kind of funny to hear that. I feel like there's places both for the very rigid, prescribed curriculum, and then there's also places in education for the more flexible and, I would usually think, innovative or more exploratory, creative education as well. And I think both can be very good, or even both could harm education in different circumstances. So it's really awesome to like hear you talk about this and hear there's substance behind these decisions you made, and you being an educator. It's very exciting for me to hear the passion you have just coming through with you thinking deeply about this.
Yeah, well, I feel excited too. And one of the great things about the program I'm in is that I get a chance to apply these different kind of theories or frameworks in a practicum teaching. So I teach an ESL class right now at UPenn. It's the PEDAL program, which is Practical English for Daily Living in Philadelphia. And this is a free class that's available to relatives of Penn faculty to come. And I teach a small class of about 4 to 8 people, but it's a conversation skills class. And so I'm kind of applying some of the things we learn about second language development, and also about conversational usage to my classroom, which has been great to see those practical applications of some of these. They can be kind of nebulous, abstract academic theories. So it's great to see the rubber hit the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did want to just interrupt for a second. If you just tuned in, again, my name is Michael Wehar. I'm broadcasting from WSRN 91.5 FM at Swarthmore College, and we have a special guest, Evan Port, and you've been telling us some great things about your professional and educational journey and how you've ended up at Penn now. And one of the things I wanted to ask about is this TESOL program. Could you tell us a little bit about that program? That, if I understand, you're currently in this program and engaged with it. What is it?
What is it? So TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. And this is a program that's within the Educational Linguistics Department at Penn, in the Graduate School of Education, that is solely focused on essentially English teaching. So a lot of my classes have to do with things like second language development, curriculum design, language diversity in education. And then they do have a practicum teaching requirement where there's a course specifically designed to support young teachers or teachers who are just kind of in the classroom, where you can talk about some things that go on. You can brainstorm ideas for activities. And of course, then as a requirement for that class, you need to go out into a community language teaching setting. And I was lucky enough to be accepted to the University of Pennsylvania's community English teaching program. Mm-hmm. And so that's been going great. I've been having a lot of fun doing that.
That's really cool. Thank you for telling us more about it. And so we talked a bit about how you got where you are now. You're in a graduate program. You're learning a lot. You're teaching. You're contributing to hopefully our advancement in this field. But you did mention that you were in China. And could you tell us a little bit about how that came about? And I believe it was related to language. And could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So actually at the start, it was nothing to do with language. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, was living in Shanghai, China. And I was in Omaha, Nebraska, back with my parents. I had graduated from my undergraduate with a degree in linguistics and international studies. And what do you do with that? I was working at the library, but I was also drawing some cartoons at that time. And my girlfriend, she showed the cartoons to a Chinese celebrity, and they liked the cartoons enough that they brought me over, flew me over to Shanghai for a short 3-month contract. I did some user interface design for them, and also some graphic design, and designed like an avatar generator so that their users could make little characters for their celebrity app. But after the 3 months were over, I wanted to stay. Shanghai was a great place to be. I was happy there, had lots of exciting experiences with the new culture, and trying different foods and going to different historical places. And so I stayed on. I worked for a small video game company making web games. And then, of course, when COVID hit, there was a real need to get like a full working visa to stay there and work. And so I used my background in linguistics to essentially secure a teaching position, and was there up until 2022.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I actually didn't know the whole background to that.
Yeah.
It wasn't originally for language reasons, but then it turned into that. And that's really amazing how you went from pursuing this field there to back here again, and continuing that in your graduate studies. And I'm just sure that you have such a wealth of knowledge and experiences that you've gained through all of that. So I think this is going to bring us to the next topic. And I want to hear about, are there any challenges that you faced in starting grad school? And do you have any advice for people who might be considering grad school, or who might already be in graduate programs just starting out?
So I think a lot of people who went to, or a lot of people who want to go to graduate programs, I should say, are going straight from undergrad. And I felt coming from kind of a break that was like work experience was really helpful, because then I kind of have some real world problems in mind that I want to apply the knowledge to. So for me, I think one of the challenges of graduate school would just be workload. I'm 31 years old, married now. I have to be working and provide some kind of money. So balancing work and balancing school, I think, would be one of the biggest challenges for me. Of course, not everybody has to worry about that, but it is something to think about. And the other thing I would say, the reading workload is quite high. I'd say somewhere between 200 to 300 pages a week of dense academic related readings. It's a blast. I love it, but it can be a lot.
Mm-hmm. How do you manage all that? Have you found that you've been developing a new skill to be able to multitask, or to be able to be more consistent, or to plan this out over your week? Or have you always been an expert of all of those things?
Not at all. Not at all. Sorry.
What advice do you have to people starting out in graduate studies to be able to get through all that and navigate all of that?
Yeah. So, okay, that's a great question. I would say time management is a big thing. I did not used to be a super organized person. I'm a mess. And
I don't think so.
Well,
but
it's true. But managing my time has been like an intentional kind of thing that I make time to, one, get my school stuff done, but also I make time for myself, right? So I have about one free day per week where I can go do something fun, right? But the rest of it, I have to be either working or reading or doing assignments. It's about prioritizing your tasks, and I guess I've improved enough. Although I still from time to time feel like it's a lot for me. So that's something I'm still working on. But time management, I think, would be my biggest. Like, if you can find a way to organize your time and have it work for you, I would stick with that. That's my advice to young graduate students or people who are just starting out.
Well, I really liked a bunch of things you said there. I mean, it just kind of showed off how you have a passion, you're motivated, you have a commitment and dedication to it, and sometimes that's really needed, and it takes some time to develop that. but through a lot of these great experiences in your life, I'm sure that those have helped you to get to that point. And I think we're all pursuing that or trying to get there. So something else I wanted to talk about, are there any inspirations that you've had that have kind of led you to this subject or to want to go to grad school? Are there any things that have happened to you in your life or people you've seen that you were like, this is really a worthwhile cause. This is a topic that's exciting that I need to get into and pursue. Any thoughts on that? Any examples you have from your own experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that really drove me to kind of learn more and to go into this master's program was some of the problems I saw with the training center I was working at in Shanghai. So I mentioned the curriculum implementation was pretty rigid, and it wasn't a one-size-fits-all thing. Some students did not connect with it. Some students needed differentiation. I guess it would be the academic term for it. You need to make the lessons kind of fit the students, and there wasn't really room for that. And so I kind of was like, why aren't people kind of focused more towards like something that's more adaptive, and something that is kind of student informed and built around student needs? Why are we dictating, these grammar structures and these vocabulary words are going to be what makes you a proficient speaker of English? And so kind of thinking about some ways to build in flexibility and modularity and differentiation into curriculum. That's kind of what's driving my interest right now. Yeah.
I think that's really great. I think there is a trend in making education more adaptable.
Absolutely.
And it's catering to the students you have while still holding them to a standard or still having some core commonality, but making adjustments for the audience you're presenting to, you're educating, you're assisting, you're helping. Me personally, I've had some inspirational experiences where students or colleagues of mine had not been served or had not been learning what they should have been learning. And it wasn't because they didn't want to, it wasn't because they didn't find it interesting, and it wasn't that they were unmotivated. It was just there was no adaptability for them. There was no kind of customization or flexibility to it. So me personally, I like to think of myself as a very kind of flexible, on that spectrum, that tug of war between rigid and flexibility. I'm more on the flexible side, but I do believe rigidity is important too in education, but I can definitely feel some of what you're saying as having had a theme in my life too.
Yeah, and part of that rigidity is also connected to student expectations, right? So if student has a certain conception of a class where if they come to a language class, they're going to expect to learn some kind of grammar. They're going to expect to have certain kind of structural things that are taught explicitly. And so when you start a class that's more conversation based, some students really like it, but other students, of course, are looking for somebody needs to teach me the present perfect tense. I need to master conjunctions or conditional statements, right? So there is a kind of a balance with student expectations, especially if they're looking for something that is more like traditional conceptions of a language class.
So I have just one more question I'm going to ask you today, and that is, do you have any favorite subtopics to teach, or do you have any favorite subtopics related to language in general that you're just enthusiastic about? And if this is a tough question, I can share some of mine, but I'll give you the...
Well, it sounds like you want to share.
Oh, okay. I'm putting myself on the spot
Yeah.
now. But I love to communicate with people. So I think being able to communicate information, whether it's information that needs to be conveyed or information that you can just enjoy together, I think either of those is really great. And I just think communicating is a really important skill, and it needs to continue to be cared for, nurtured, developed. Communication evolves over time. So that's definitely something I love about language. I also like the kind of theories of language, like how did this happen? How did we develop this structure? And then it seems like we have a structure, and then all of a sudden it's broken because there's tons of counterexamples that kind of go against the structure. And people seem to be communicating effectively, even with these contradictory sort of ways of building sentences and speaking to each other.
Absolutely. And you touched on kind of something that's central to my beliefs about language, which is that language learning is essentially a means to an end, right? Most people do not learn language just to learn language themselves. There are some. If you're out there and just learning language for fun, good on you. But most people are learning it for a specific purpose and a communicative purpose, right? And so something that I teach in my class for adult learners is actually something that's more aligned with like a public speaking course. These are conversation skills. So learning about things like building rapport with shared values, or learning explicitly about turn taking in conversations, learning how to signpost a longer kind of speech so that people can follow along and listen. These kind of skills are not traditionally covered, especially in like the intermediate levels. Maybe some advanced courses will cover them, but I think it's a real skill, being able to talk to somebody and have good conversations. This is kind of a skill set it's a little bit nebulous, I'd say. You can't just define what is a good conversation. It's different in every scenario, but I think there's a toolkit that I'm trying to provide to my students so that they can ultimately use their language out in the real world. And that's linked to some theory, where the theory is that usage actually drives the language acquisition or the language development. And so giving students the tools to use language in the real world, I think is an incredibly valuable thing for them, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. This has been really great. And I did want to give you the opportunity, if you have any questions or if you have any last things that you want to share with the audience, this is your moment.
Wow. I can ask anything. Well, I do want to say thank you so much for having me. And I kind of wanted to circle back to something you're talking. So you're a computer science professor. What does communication have to do with computer science? How can we make a connection there?
Yeah. So I think communication can be quite difficult when talking about computer science or any of the more technical sciences. You're talking about how a system works, how this program works. What is this component? What is that component? Why did we design it a certain way? All the time, we're in a sort of deadlock situation of I'm trying to convey this to one person, they're trying to convey something back to me, and I don't understand my thing because they don't understand their thing. And it's like a back and forth, and you got to break that cycle. You got to figure out what way could you modify what you're saying so that it can get through, and then they can modify what they're saying so it can get through, so that you can resume your normal discourse and break out of this kind of not understanding each other. So I feel like I personally only speak English. I'd love to learn another language, but I feel like if you're trying to communicate with someone else and you just can't understand each other, that's kind of similar to what I deal with all the time talking about programs. It's like it's not that we're both very reasonable, we're both very kind, but what we're talking about is something complicated where the words don't exist yet to be able to express the concept, and we have to kind of invent those words, invent those notations so that we can get the point across. And more often than not, I'm presenting ideas that are well understood, where we can communicate, we can learn the basics of programming, but I'm talking more about once we get to that kind of capstone level project where they're building a system themselves. That's when we'll have these situations where you really got to be careful about your communication and solve these communicative problems.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very specific technical context. And I imagine there's a lot of jargon used that's only specific to very, very niche use cases, right? So that sounds like a real challenge.
Yeah, I see this in a lot of scientific fields where they'll have their own jargon, they'll have their own terminology, and it'll have its own theory to it, and it'll break down all the time because what they're pursuing is actually a pretty complicated topic, and as I said, the language isn't as refined or matured as like the normal discourse we do every day.
Right.
And there's definitely been times where I'm talking about some computer system while out at a store with a friend, and the people around us are like, what are they talking about? They're speaking some other made up code that doesn't make sense. And we'll get some funny faces from time to time, but we'll also sometimes we'll get interested people who are like, what is this? Tell me about this. And it's a pretty funny situation, but I'm sure anyone can encounter that. If you have something you're really passionate about and you go down that rabbit hole into the kind of what's being invented today, what's the new trendy stuff, before you know it, you'll be encountering those situations where the words haven't yet been invented to discuss the topic.
Very exciting. It's the cutting edge. So I do have one more question I wanted to ask you, and this is for my students. We're getting ready to do a project in my class where we're making a podcast together. And as a radio host, as an experienced interviewer, I wondered if you had any tips for giving a good podcast or audio interview.
Yeah, so this is maybe around my 30th or so interview here at the radio station. Again, in case you're just tuning in, my name's Michael Wehar, and we have Evan Port here who just asked this great question. And Evan's been telling us about his graduate studies, his professional pursuits, and his passions ultimately. And it's been really awesome. But the tables have turned. I was asking him the questions. Now he's asking me.
I had to do it.
I was the interviewer. Now I'm the interviewee. And he just asked me, what are some tips I have for other interviewers? Well, I'm not going to claim I know everything. I don't. I am just kind of learning. I've listened to lots of interviewers throughout history, which is actually kind of fun. We had a broadcasting course we offered at the college. It was called Broadcasting Technology, and I got to lead that course with Matt Powell, who helps manage the record library here in the station. It was a course for credit.
Oh, great.
We had a few students who took it, and they got credit to broadcast and learn about radio, learn about speaking and things like that. And we listened to some of these historical broadcasters, and it's just amazing to see how they can just capture attention. They can, just with sound, not even words, they can set a mood. They can kind of set up what's to come. And so I can't do that. I wish I could do that. But what I can do is, I think for anyone doing an interview, you might not be the best listener, but try to do a little bit better than you've done in the past at listening. So even if you're not the best listener, that's okay, but just try to do a little bit better than you usually would. Try to push yourself to listen better. So be receptive to the person you're interviewing. And another piece of advice is have some questions you've prepared in advance, a few. And the third thing I was going to say is you want this to be a fun, enjoyable, and interesting, engaging experience. One of the best ways to do that is the person coming in to be interviewed. Often they don't do this every day. Give them the chance to talk. They've prepared a lot. They've thought about this. They have excitement. And you want them to be able to speak. They're going to be able to share so much of value. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is let the interviewee lead the interview through the content that they share.
You just watch out. They might flip the script on you like I've done here. Thank you so much for that, Mike.
Sure. Thank you so much, Evan. Again, we're broadcasting from WSRN 91.5 FM at Swarthmore College, and we're going to sign off for today. And again, we're just so glad to have you, Evan, and we wish you the best in your graduate studies. And any of the students out there, if you're thinking about graduate studies, maybe we can connect you with Evan, and I, of course, will be glad to try to help or offer advice to you. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.